Hooray, it's shit! I'm John Ritlin with a retro review of WCW Bash at the Beach 2000, the most Russo-rific 3-hour pay-per-view that ever was. Nothing that followed would top how fucking bullshit this show was. I'm honestly baffled while watching this, and I've seen it before. And I decided to watch it because people wanted me to continue to review these WCW shows, and I wanted to review them because I'm like, you know what? Maybe I can find some gems. Maybe I can find some good stuff. Maybe some stuff that I remember isn't all that bad. In this case, it's true because this was worse. This was so much worse. Fucking hell, this was the absolute death nail of WCW. And here's why. Okay, here's why it was the death nail of WCW. Because no matter what good came out of this pay-per-view, Booker T winning the WCW Championship, a few matches actually having some decent spots and everything that could have gone wrong with this show went wrong. Now, I encourage you guys to check out Bischoff's podcast where he talks about the inner workings and why stuff went down the way it did with Jeff Jarrett and Hulk Hogan. But oh boy, there's a lot to unpack here, so don't be fucking shocked if I get just a little bit angry during this. Just fucking hell. We have the Young Dragons confronting Ernest Miller and their music plays. And this happens multiple times. Like, who's syncing up the music? Is a production man in cahoots? Shout out to the Durbinator for that if he happens to be watching us. Hi, Chris. Hope you're doing well. But then he then says to his limo driver, while, this is happening, he's banning MIA and the Filthy Animals from ringside for the first match. And then the Dragons attack Miller. Badly. Very badly. With some of the worst, karate stuff that I've ever seen. Now, not to say that I wanted them to actually hit Ernest Miller, but I'm just saying that maybe it would have knocked some sense into him if they would have laid in at least one potato, because Ernest Miller was all over this pay-per-view, and it was even worse than usual. So we have Hoovy with versus Chavo, and all the people are banned from ringside, yet they all come down to the ring, and then they all get informed that they got to go back. So, okay, that's what we're doing that. We're not even informing the talents. Everybody's just like, oh, wait, we didn't watch the monitor or, pay attention to what was going on outside. Wait, we're supposed to be banned from ringside? Shit, we could have saved ourselves some steps. We could have gotten our steps in by walking around backstage instead of walking out there and making the audience wonder what the fuck is Russo doing. But nobody knew what Russo was doing. Russo didn't know what Russo was doing. They at least tried. I will give them credit for that, but here's the thing. It got really sloppy, really sloppy. Scott Hudson at one point said, wrestling, and the other idiot, Mark Madden said, oh, it's sports entertainment. This is another reason why you shouldn't take anything that Madden says seriously, because you have to have entertainment in a product for it to actually be sports entertainment. This was not entertaining. This was absolutely atrocious. The Filthy Animals then show up in masks, and these stupid masks to try and interfere, and then MIA does the same damn thing. Major Guns comes down to distract, so nobody gets DQ'd, nobody gets fined for being banned from ringside and still coming down. Tornado DDT for 3. They kept bogging down this pay-per-view. This is the third longest match on the pay-per-view, by the way, and it could have been a quick 8 minutes without all this interference bullshit, and actually might have not been that bad, because Hoovy, for all his, personal problems and all the fact that he's a goddamn, nut job and not very nice, apparently, can go in the ring, or at least at this point. Chavo could go in the ring. And this is what they did with this. Then we have Ernest Miller and the Young Dragons again, and they're doing the music shit. What the hell is going on? Jarrett then wants Hogan, and one of those Viking ladies, that was from the episode Nitro that I just reviewed. Check that out, by the way, if you haven't already. But yeah, that's where we're going with this. He's still got this, this heavy-set woman with him, which factors into something a little bit later. Big Vito versus Screamin' Norman and Ralphus. We are getting them in a hardcore championship match again, because Johnny the Bull apparently suffered some sort of injury. He would later go on to be Relic, which is killer spelled backwards, which Impact made sure to tell us about 50 million times. I don't know why this was done. I don't know why you didn't just not have the match, and I love Norman. Ralphus was what he was. Vito was bleeding. Ralphus got in some shots, actually did some offense, and then got beat up. And then Ralphus, eventually when they battled in the ring, and then battled to the back, and then battled back out to the ring, because that's how the match was supposed to start, despite the fact the bell rang, and that's what it was fucking bad. Ralphus gets splashed through a table, there you go. That's your lot on that. Nash then talks about Goldberg, while they censor a whole bunch of stuff that he says, yet later they don't censor a bunch of stuff that's also said. And it makes no sense why they would censor that. On pay-per-view, by the way. Miss Hancock versus Daphne in a wedding dress match, or a wedding gown match, or an evening gown dress match. And why was the storyline ever a thing? Why? And I have nothing against Miss Hancock as a person. I have nothing against Daphne as a person. I think Daphne deserves a whole lot better than she got in wrestling. And credit to Miss Hancock, aka Stacy Keibler, for turning down a women's championship match or women's championship run in WWE because there were more deserving women. This is true. She was right. And she could hit a hell of a spin kick and actually was a really good athlete. But this match did not need to happen because, one, it involved David Flair. David Flair kept interfering. And Crowbar was also there. And it was some of the worst goddamn shit. The referee gets his pants pulled down. And then David gets his pants pulled down. So I guess by proxy, does Miss Hancock lose? Was it a handicapped evening gown match? The first person to lose their pants their opponent wins. What is going on here? Why am I losing the plot? Probably because this pay-per-view had no goddamn plot. Here's Crowbar. He then strips down to his boxers and hits an elbow drop on David Flair just to, iron out and just to cement the fact that nobody should take any of this shit seriously. There's comedy and then there's this bullshit. And then Miss Hancock removes her dress because she's dancing, so therefore Daphne wins by default. And then, because there's a wedding cake at ringside, because it's a wedding gown match, she takes a load of frosting and pushes it into Miss Hancock's face. That's right, Stacy Keibler got a load of frosting in the face. I'm going to say that, so any of the fanboys having to be watching can just be a little bit happy. And if you happen to be one of the mutuals that really likes Miss Hancock, you know who you are. I hope you appreciate that. And then the cake got all busted down and everything and smeared all over the ring mats, by the way. Now, if you know anything about cake, and you should, varieties of cake. It's like varieties of pie, except Dwayne Johnson wasn't on here, thank fucking Christ. Even he couldn't have saved WCW by this point. The cake gets smeared all over the cake, the frosting, everything gets smeared all over the goddamn ring mats. Okay, you could clear it out of the canvas, or you could take you could have the announcers kill time and change out the canvas and stuff like that. You could do something like that. Or what you could do is you cut to the back, you'd have the Young Dragon stalking Ernest Miller again, one of them even hiding behind a goddamn broom. The announcers then talk about Hogan not, showing up, because Hogan was supposed to show up, and the whole thing about, would he do the right thing against Jeff Jarrett? Would they go back to, I think it was Fall Brawl or Halloween Havoc? Was it Halloween Havoc last? I think it was Halloween Havoc last, the previous year, where Hogan did the laydown thing against Sting, and it was really, really shit. But then the cleanup crew doesn't even have a mop or a very good mop and bucket. They have terrible supplies there. Some people are just like using some weird kind of dish soap or whatever to cut through it. I get it. Some stains are ridiculous and you have to think on the fly and stuff like that. But why did nobody think, hey, let's have all these clean supplies and all this stuff and everything, instead of keeping the crew on their toes? Let's just keep the crowd on their toes, but make sure that the crew could actually clean this shit up. Why was this happening? Why? Why in God's name was this happening? Why was Vince Russo allowed to ever be in the wrestling business? Why did anybody pay him? Who got him in the wrestling business? I curse their name. I curse his mother and father's name. I curse the grandparents' name. I curse the entire Russo family tree, which is probably a straight line because they were probably all brothers and sisters that ended up commingling and fucking, which explains why Vince Russo is so goddamn stupid and a dickless wonder. And I'm willing to bet that his wife ended up having to go to a fertility clinic to get, to get samples from real men that could actually reproduce. So I don't think those are his kids. But if they are his kids, hopefully those kids leave and they get the fuck out of there and they grow to be better people, more mature people, which isn't really going to be that hard because Vince Russo's always been an immature, little jackass. He's about as mature as I am when it comes to humor. But at least for me, I've never ran a multi-million-dollar wrestling company. Vince Russo is the worst thing to happen to professional wrestling in the last 25 years, bar none. I think he's even worse than what Jim Herd did. Because Jim Herd was an idiot, but you know what? He came up with some ideas. At least he thought turning Great Muta babyface at one point would have worked. What did Vince Russo ever do that was anything good? Without following it up with complete bullshit. That's what he fucking did here. And again, the cleanup crew takes forever because they didn't give them the right supplies. It was absolutely fucking hilarious. We then get the perfect event with Chronic. Well, actually, it would have been kind of funny if they had Chronic, but no, everybody just suffered chronic fatigue at this point. It was a WCW Tag Team Championship match. It was the second longest match on the show, and it should have been half the time. This was all built around the fact the perfect event kept, lucking into winning matches and winning the WCW Tag Team Championships, and Chronic had been pursuing them and wanting to get them, Chronic dominated at first. The cake mess is still at ringside, by the way. So everybody's almost slipping in that shit, which is a great way to turn some ankles and to injure some people. But Vince Russo had to get his comedy in because it's a swerve, bro. You goddamn dickless wonder, you fucking piece of shit. You deserve every bit of bad shit that you get said about you. And I hope that your children abandon you. Have I mentioned that recently? Not in the last couple minutes. I hope Vince Russo's children abandon him. So, we get more of this cake mess, more of this bullshit. The rest holds, hooray. Stasiak and Palumbo, by the way, are two pretty good athletes, and at least at this time. I mean, they might still be. I have no idea. But they should not have been featured as the tag team champions. Like, I understand pushing young talent, but it just wasn't working. People were not buying into them. They try to get the flexi Lexi bar thing, you know, the bendy thing, the bendy springy thing that they get there. And they try to do that, but then the Doomsday device, and Chronic finally gets the victory. Finally, for fuck's sake, get the tag team championships on a good team, and then Palumbo and Stasiak are upset. By the way, their sunburns recovered really quickly when they were in the tanning bed, you know, and they almost pulled a Final Destination 3, which actually would have been kind of hilarious if they had, you know, tried to do that with the people that greenlit that bullshit, and not Stasiak and Palumbo. But the Young Dragons then bother Miller again. Miller's on the phone while their music first cues up, but they really do some bad shit here. Jarrett then yells at Miller, and then the Young Dragons do some stuff. And why is this still happening? Why is this still happening? To what end? The ninja stuff isn't funny on WWE TV, and this shit wasn't funny. Jamie Noble isn't even actually Japanese. That's why they had to put him in a mask. But also, Jamie Noble's a hell of an athlete, and I hope Jamie Noble's okay. Because we all know why. You know, he had, you know, he has the virus, and hopefully he's all right. Then we get Booker T versus Positively Canyon, and oh boy, the crowd loved Booker. They were cheering for Booker really, really loudly. Really, really loudly. And Canyon's a great athlete. Innovative shit here that he was doing. Some pretty good stuff. Like, he is really, it's a shame how life ended for Canyon. Hell of a talent. Really, really good stuff. I'm not saying he ever would have been a world champion. Ability alone, sure, but he could have been a fine mid-card champion for a lot of years. WWE should have used him a whole lot better. I think Impact could have used him pretty well. It's a real shame about Canyon. So he does this one spot where he slams a chair into the steps that are laying on Booker. There's that stuff. Book to the head, but the brick gets taken out. It's not the brick house. It's Mighty Mighty, and then Booker just kicks out. So Booker, you know, pretends to get hurt, you know, because the book's hollowed out and stuff like that. And then Jarrett then runs down after a bookend was hit. And Jarrett hits Booker with the guitar, the acoustic equalizer, as Scott Hudson kept saying, which actually is a pretty good way of putting it. And then Canyon cutter for 3. So Booker T, by the way, who's going to be in the main event, unbeknownst to him, a little bit later, like about halfway. This is about halfway through the pay-per-view. He's going to be in the main event, and he loses. Whew. We then have Pamela attempting to interview Mike Awesome, who's flirting with one of the Viking women, you know, because she's heavyset, because he would become the fat chick Thriller. And then that 70s guy. It's a wonder that Mike Awesome ever survived WCW at all. Now, I know he was only in WWE for a little bit and then wasn't in wrestling for all that much. I think he got into real estate. But WCW misused him so goddamn badly. It is fucking baffling that they used him so badly. So then we get Mike Awesome versus Scott Steiner, U.S. Tag Team Championship, or U.S. Tag Team Champion. You know, it would have been interesting if they brought the tag team titles back. Nope, just the standard singles U.S. title. The quick start, they go into the crowd for a while. I mean, this isn't the only match that goes into the crowd. We get a belly-to-belly off the ropes for 2. And then a ring bell to the head, a chair to the back, no DQ. Ernest Miller shows up. He's stopping the Steiner recliner because it's an illegal choke. You can't use it. Oh no, you can't use it. And then he uses it after a whole bunch of stuff, a low blow and stuff like that. And then Miller accidentally kicks Mike Awesome in the Steiner recliner. And Miller says he's going to strip him of the championship. So there you go. That's your lot. That's how you get a title off of Scott Steiner. You don't have him do a job. You don't have him put somebody over. You just take the title off of him. Does he award it to Mike Awesome? I actually don't remember. I'm going to have to watch Nitro after this. Or answers in the comments, please, because I actually forgot. Well, actually, now that I think about it, Lance Storm did become U.S. champion for a little bit and then made it the Canadian championship, which actually was pretty damn cool. Lance Storm should have been featured a lot better in WCW, even though he was there at a point where, fucking hell, he was just in a goddamn, he was in a great, great frame of mind, but he was in the company, when they were in a horrible state. Steiner gets upset, T-bones Mike Awesome on his neck. I hope Mike Awesome was okay there, because the neck ain't supposed to bend that way. That was really fucking brutal. And then we get the Demon with Asia versus Vampiro in a graveyard match. Oh, dear. Oh, boy. You know, we are in peak WCW bullshit right here. They were in a graveyard with moonlight, maybe a spotlight, and then a flashlight. It's close to midnight, and something evil's lurking in the dark. Vampiro was in a tree, by the way, because Asia accompanied the Demon into this dangerous graveyard, the city graveyard. And if you get that reference, I love you guys. Perfect Circle, I believe, is the name of the band. But anyway, Vampiro jumps out of a tree. Okay? He's hanging there like a bat. He's all spoopiness. It's all ridiculous. And then they're in an open grave, and then they're just next to a river. They're all around here. Who asked for this match, and how much money did they spend on this? This was a feud that nobody wanted. Literally, nobody wanted. I mean, and Vampiro, as far as a character, I love him in the ring. Whereas outside the ring, you know, a bit much. Demon, I think Dale Torborg did the best he could. Like, he really did. He didn't get much of a chance to really be anything other than a career-killing gimmick like this. But he was a decent athlete. And Asia was also there. Asia with a Y, by the way, not playing off of China. Why would you say that? WCW never copied WWE except all the time. Same with WWE copying WCW. And companies are still copying each other to this day. Moving on. He attempted to drown the Demon in the goddamn river. That was a great move. Great move. No, it's not. It's not a fucking great move. It's fucking terrible. And then Vampiro drags Asia with him. And then Vampiro is in a coffin suddenly. Because Torborg manages to rescue him. Or rescue Asia, rather. But can't find him, a.k.a. Vampiro. And then he opens a casket and sprays the Demon with that, you know, red mist and stuff like that. The blood, like Asia used. Only that time of the month. And then a tombstone piece to the head. And Torborg is put in a casket and then hurled into an open grave. And then the torch is tossed in there. And you have to win this match, by the way, by getting back to the arena. So Vampiro heads back to the arena. It's not over yet. We then cut to a Shane Douglas promo. So you already know that this fucking pay-per-view is goddamn ridiculous. He says that he guarantees he will beat Bagwell. That is your lot on that right there. We are not even over here. That's how many notes I had. Bagwell versus Shane Douglas in 2000. This is exactly what pay-per-view audiences wanted to see. So they regret spending money on the next pay-per-view if they didn't already regret spending money on this. And I watched this at a friend's house. And his uncle was like, man, I shouldn't have paid for this. I go, look, I said, man, I got some money. You want me to? Like, nah, I'm good. This was not good at all. Tori then shows up, slaps Shane. Oh, it's all a swerve, bro. Because then she low blows Buff Bagwell. Pittsburgh plunge for 2. What in the world? A weird jawbreaker for 3. And then she kisses Shane. That's the end for this. No, that's not the end of the pay-per-view. I wish it was the end of the pay-per-view, except Buff Bagwell versus Shane Douglas would have been an odd way to end it. Here's Michael Buffer, all the pomp and circus pants, and here's Vince Russo with the WCW Championship. Or actually, here's Vince Russo just at first. This is all the Hogan versus Jarrett WCW title match, and peak bullshit. I am not a Hulk Hogan fan. Hulk Hogan uses creative control that he never used bull fucking shit. Hulk Hogan used his creative control a lot. But you know what? They could have made something work here. You know what they didn't do? Make something work here. This was fucking rotten. This was fucking atrocious. I cannot believe that this was actually allowed on pay-per-view. It was Vince Russo taking his ball and saying, no, you need to play my way. It's mine. This is my company. I get to do this. There's nothing wrong with wanting to get older people out, but it's the fact that he hitched his wagon to Jeff Jarrett, who was no good at all. I mean, as far as a main eventer. As a wrestler, sure, he was a great pure wrestler. He was well versed in a lot of the grafts. He was a very good territorial wrestler. He just wasn't a main eventer. And he ends up, we get the whole thing. I'm not going to go into everything, minute detail on this, but it's just watching this unfold. The crowd is fucking pissed. Hogan even says, is this you're doing, Russo? That's why this company is in the damn shape it's in, because of bullshit like this. Then he pins Jarrett 1, 2, 3, because Jarrett laid down. And it was absolutely fucking stupid. It was so fucking bad. So fucking goddamn bad. And this wasn't even the end. Jarrett leaves, Russo's upset, Hogan leaves with the championship. That would be the last appearance of Hulk Hogan on WCW programming. And we would find out later that he would get a lot of money from WCW because Russo would open his big, fat, stupid, worthless mouth. Vampiro is here, and he promised he would destroy both the Demon and Sting. Geez, mask guys, his weird druid people, the stinging druids, if you will, suddenly show up, and they have the coffin in the arena. And then Sting appears, suddenly. It was really badly lit to the point where I'm not even sure we were supposed to know what was going on, or supposed to care what was going on, but it was really fucking bad. It was really spectacularly bad. It was, he ends up putting Vampiro in the casket, and that's the end of that. We just have to assume it was Sting. Because the lighting, you can't see fuck all of what's going on here, but we're on the goddamn road here. Because then, Goldberg's promo, he wants to make Nash suffer. But then we get Vince Russo doing the peak thing of all this, where he just showed that he was nothing more than a goddamn little child and a little dickless wonder that never deserved to be in wrestling. He never deserved to even have anything to do with wrestling. If he called himself a wrestling fan back then, I wouldn't have believed it, because no fan of wrestling would have done shit like this. No fan would have gone to the lengths that he did to shit on wrestling, even if you're not a fan of Hulk Hogan. And I'm not. I can appreciate what Hogan did, but a lot of the shit that he did also do in his career, and, the racism stuff, and the fact that he never apologized, and a lot of other shit, and the fact that Randy Savage is always fucking better, and I will go with the goddamn grave saying that. Sounds like a bit of a line I'm going to use here in a little bit. Hulk Hogan still meant a whole lot to wrestling, and even in 2000 meant a lot to wrestling. If they had gone with the original idea of Hogan leaving and then having a unification match with somebody at Halloween Havoc 2000, like the original plan was supposed to be, okay, cool. That might have been kind of funny, but no. Russo is like all despondent and everything. He's all upset. He's all doing it for, he came back to WCW because he loves certain wrestlers like Booker T, Jeff Jarrett, and other people that busted their asses and didn't do with the bullshit that Hulk Hogan did and others did. And he focused on Hogan, and he said Hulk Hogan decided he was going to play his creative control card. And he deals with the bullshit and the backstage politics, that take place behind that curtain. And he said, I got a wife, I got 3 kids, or, kids. I think he might have just a couple kids. God forbid if he reproduced any more. And I really don't need this shit. Well, that's okay, Russo. We never needed you here either. We, the fans, never fucking needed you. By the way, if you're a Russo fan, I should clarify that you can be a Russo fan. I don't understand how somebody could be, because to me, he is the worst thing to ever happen to wrestling. I mean, yes, you could, point out others that have done way more egregious things. Jimmy Snuka, Chris Benoit, so don't get me wrong, but at least they were in the ring. And Vince Russo committed more career murders than those guys did. I will say that right there. He committed more career murders. It just, so many people suffered because of his horrible booking. Absolutely suffered. And then he says about Hogan, he says, it's like, I will go, it's like, I swear I also will go in the damn grave. You will never see that piece of shit again. Now, he was right. He never saw him in WCW, but then he's all talking about, it's going to be Booker T versus Jeff Jarrett. Booker T is going to get his opportunity, this kind of stuff. And Russo just basically slapping the fans in the face, slapping anybody in the face who was a veteran that deserved their spot. But he stuck up for Jeff Jarrett because Jeff Jarrett was his boy. He was the chosen joke. Boy, this was fucking stupid. Kevin Nash versus Goldberg for Scott Hall's contract. Look, for what these guys could do in the ring, which was very limited, very fucking limited, so fucking limited, I'm amazed that Nash didn't tear a quad trying to get out of the ring or get out of the way of a spear, and I'm amazed Goldberg didn't brain himself on the post like he did in Saudi Arabia. Oh boy. Yeah, they did what they could. There was, some decent power moves and stuff like that, but their match, I believe it was Spring Stampede 99, was a whole lot better than this, a whole lot better. Scott Steiner shows up to cheer on Nash. But then he attacks him. It's a swerve. It's a fucking swerve. Enough with your goddamn swerves, you dickless wonder. And, spear, jackhammer, 1, 2, 3, and Goldberg, ends Scott Hall's career. Scott Hall was already done anyway. They were just finding a way to eke along the contract because he was, I think, pretty much done after this. Yeah, they tear that, and he uses the Steiner recliner, and apparently, I guess, because it wasn't in a match, and I guess he's Ernest Miller's guy now, that, because he's a bad guy, suddenly it's not an illegal chokehold anymore. Booker promo, he is hyping up for the main event, and then we get Jeff, you know what, here. This is all I gotta fucking say. I want to say this much. I want to say this much. I really like Booker T, and I'm glad that Booker T won here. But they did every goddamn shenanigan-filled motherfucking bullshit thing here with ref bumps and a whole bunch of, stupid, weapon spots and everything. Everything they could to try and just take away from Booker. It didn't help Booker the way he won it. Him winning it was goddamn cool. The crowd did go nuts, that venue couldn't have been more than half full. That was really sad to see. WCW, the once mighty WCW, was absolutely fucking reduced to nothing. They were reduced to nothing by this point. Booker winning the WCW championship was great. Here's the problem. By the time he won his final WCW championship on the last episode of Nitro, which was March 26, 2001, 8.5 months later, 8.5 months later, he was a 5-time WCW champion. He was a 5-time champion in the span of 8.5 months. So, yeah, if that doesn't tell you how little titles meant in Vince Russo's WCW, I don't know what fucking will. This was a fucking rotten pay-per-view, and once again, I curse the fact that Vince Russo was ever born. I fucking hate it. I fucking hate the fact that Vince Russo was ever allowed near wrestling. Yeah, I despise Vince Russo. Even Ernest Miller, his presence here, didn't annoy me as much as the fact that this was Vince Russo shitting on everything that wrestling stood for. And he's continued to do that. And I have no respect for him. I'll never have any respect for him, and I hope his kids abandon him. And he ends up growing old knowing that nobody ever truly loved him because nobody ever should have loved him. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that. Agree, disagree, what I said. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. Fuck the hell out of Vince Russo. Fuck this goddamn company. I'm glad it's dead, but I'm going to keep reviewing it, guys. I'll see you soon.